All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick as always. Today, Drew, we're going to talk a little Premier League, a little Harry Kane, and then we'll talk about some new offensive coordinators, talk about the Chiefs and the Commanders, teams at violently opposite ends of the spectrum. But let's start off with the Premier League, which kicks off this weekend. Some marquee games with the big news is that Tottenham have accepted a bid from Bayern Munich for the services of Harry Kane, which has been a saga that's been going on for about 3 years now. Now, he's not necessarily gone. He still has to agree to terms with Bayern, which apparently is not a lock, but it does seem that he's probably going to go. That's just me reading the tea leaves a little bit. And so that's the biggest thing that's going on at the moment. But take a look at the outright odds in the Premier League. Man City, minus 150 favourites. Arsenal, plus 450 off of their title tilt last year. Liverpool, 8-1. Man United, 10-1, dealing with some injuries. Chelsea, 12-1, also dealing with some injuries. Newcastle, 16-1. And then Tottenham, 40-1. What are your initial thoughts about the Premier League coming into the first week of the season?
I'm usually so in the weeds doing my NFL homework this time of year that this is the first cycle that I've really paid attention to the transfer window. Sure. Wow. I mean, people give the NBA like all of this, fanfare of like, everybody just, what happened? Well, everyone changes teams. Who says no? Right. And that is the spirit that I get watching these kind of marquee names fly around Europe and the Middle East as far as opportunities go, and MLS as far as opportunities go. And it's amazing to try to wrap your head around all of the turnover of these professional squads. And, the fact that there was no European club play at all, really, there was no, international play or European team play in the summer of this year should give you these guys, a relatively reasonable expectation to come in, get off the ground running with their new squads. I think just based on, and maybe I'm crazy, and maybe this happens every year, and maybe it doesn't impact the quality of play, but the new faces, new roles, responsibilities, to me, looks like it's going to take a couple of weeks before we see fluid play, Premier League type of quality of competition that we're used to seeing. And I think the teams with kind of more continuity are the teams that I would be inclined to back early in the season, teams that I would be inclined to expect get out to a decent start to the season. And the only one that I really have circled based on, just how the roster has kind of stayed relatively static and looks pretty strong is the Brighton team, Brighton and Hove. I might be a Brighton guy this year. I found some markets where, it's basically top Premier League team out, excluding the top six. And Brighton was not the first choice, which was kind of confusing to me because I would rank them in that mix, very clearly in the mix for top six, maybe outside chance at top four. So don't really have strong feelings otherwise, other than, I know that there's some macro stuff swirling about, ultimately what the punishment is for Manchester City. And I think ultimately, like a lot of the other big six teams, to me, look like they have some pretty obvious holes. And I don't know if there's enough time to get those filled before we really get into club play.
Yeah, Brighton's interesting. They're always an XG darling, obviously a very analytically driven team. Last year, they were fourth in expected points ahead of teams like Liverpool, Man United, Tottenham, Chelsea, teams with much bigger profiles. If they keep Caicedo, who might go to Chelsea, might not, still not done, then they are interesting. They are plus 200 to finish in the top six on MGM, plus 550 to finish in the top four, which I think if they hold on to Caicedo, I think both of those become decent bets. Kind of moving out a little bit from the Premier League, my overarching, thought or concept about going into this European soccer season is I think in the futures market, it's not necessarily reflected just how much or rather how flat the non-Premier League leagues are, because so much of the money is now concentrated in the Premier League and in Saudi Arabia, where you've got teams like Crystal Palace and Fulham who have transfer marked squad valuations that would rank like 5th in Serie A, and they're like 16th and 17th in the Premier League. The Premier League it's just so much bigger and better than every other league that I think that you're seeing the financial power go away from, teams like, Barcelona have got their own financial difficulties. Real Madrid are not signing Galacticos anymore. We'll see what happens with Mbappe. And then in Italy, like Juventus, Inter, AC, like they're not gigantic. Germany is obviously anchored by Bayern Munich, but I think that we're going to see it become more likely that, teams in the 40-1, 50-1 range in La Liga and Serie A can actually challenge the Giants in ways that were just thought of as just inconceivable 5-6 years ago. So teams like Real Sociedad at 50-1 to win La Liga, or Fiorentina at 100-1 to win Serie A. That's stuff that I'm just keeping an eye on to start the season. If those kind of teams start to emerge, kind of XG darlings who proved a fair bit last season. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in the soccer season. Premier League specific, 2 teams that I have my eye on. I was going to be very high on Chelsea, but then Nkunku has hurt his knee, and that's a real big loss for them because without him, their kind of number 9 striker options become a little bit more thin. But 2 teams I've really got my eye on for different reasons. One, Wolves, who are plus 25 to get relegated, and I think there is a chance that Wolves might just be a disaster. And I want to see the first week and what they look like, but they spent a lot of money last year and got very little return, and they're in a difficult situation with managers, and it just doesn't seem like they're going to have a good season, and they could be team disaster. And then on the other side is Bournemouth, who hired the coach of Rayo Vallecano, Iraola, who played the most hectic brand of football in the Spanish league, where it's just this like crazy high line, insane pressing. I think he Rayo led La Liga in high turnovers leading to shots, just a very aggressive style of play that to the level at which you don't typically see, I think. And so I think that makes them a very high variance team, where I don't mind plus 700 Bournemouth to finish in the top half. Also don't mind Bournemouth to get relegated. I just think that that is an extremely high variance team, because Iraola is not the type of guy that typically gets hired by Premier League teams. He's kind of in the Marcelo Bielsa mold, where I could see anything happening with Bournemouth, complete catastrophe or huge overperformance. So those are my opinions. What do you think?
Well, I bet some Wolverhampton to finish bottom at 10-1 just now. That was music to my ears. I don't need much of a push in the right direction on, because some of the teams that I used to really have low opinions of are gone. They got relegated last year. So we need a new team to pick on now that Leeds is in Champions League. Is that what goes Championship League? Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I think that's a fun one. I'm still learning how to put together fair ratings for soccer clubs, and this is going to be a learning experience for me, talking about the Premier League in general this year. So kind of keeping that in mind, I will just say that I'm higher than market on 2 teams, and it's Brighton and Aston Villa. I think both are going to be, fringe top 6. As far as, ratings go, I think Liverpool and Arsenal are pretty clearly tied as number 2. I think, otherwise the shape of the market at the very top looks about right when I, compared to what I come up with an ELO model, considering, player strengths and continuity scores as we head into this season. So, I don't know if Aston Villa can carry through what we saw from them at the end of last season, but they were one of the hottest teams coming down the stretch for sure. And it was a lot of fun to back those guys. And, there wasn't enough turnover there to really spook me. So I think Villa and Brighton are the teams that I'm going to bank on through the first quarter of the season to overperform in game match by match markets.
Yep. No, I like that. And I need to find out from someone smarter than me exactly what the impact is of adding in European fixtures or not having European fixtures, and how that impacts match-to-match money lines with the rest factors, and just season-long projections by just adding in these fixtures in the Conference League that Aston Villa are going to play, or not having European football at all, which Tottenham and Chelsea are going to have the benefit of in terms of their league performance. So that is something that's a little projected for me. Last thing on Wolves, they moved on from their manager 2 days ago.
I missed that.
Season starts tomorrow.
Personnel for me for Wolves, I have ranked 16th. And the gap between them and 15, 14, 13, like that cluster is non-trivial.
Yep. They're might be in a bit of trouble. All right, team that's not going to be in a bit of trouble is the Kansas City Chiefs. Talk about them in a sec. But first, with the NFL season quickly approaching, now is the perfect time to get your RotoWorld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Get ready for your draft and stay one step ahead of your league during the preseason with updated player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. All right, Chiefs, Matt Nagy in town with Eric Bieniemy gone. Andy Reid, obviously still at the helm. With the Chiefs, in terms of their markets, I mean, they're minus 500 to make the playoffs, win total 11.5 backed over. This feels like it's just the same stuff every single year with this team. Is there any angle? We'll talk about Mahomes MVP, but is there any other angle that you like with the Chiefs?
I'm excited to see the development of the wide receiving core. And I think that kind of unlocks the ceiling for this offense being, top 5 versus number 1 with the bullet. The departure of Eric Bieniemy on paper seems like one of the least impactful losses at the offensive coordinator position across the NFL, because I think it is pretty commonly shared belief that Andy Reid is kind of the guy that matters the most when it comes to constructing the offense for this team. And honestly, Matt Nagy, not only does he have familiarity with this squad, and oh, by the way, they were a more explosive offense when he was there prior to departing for the Bears job. He's a guy that I think definitely has ideas and concepts that will be a little bit fresh. There will be some tendency breaking, which I think is going to be a key aspect to teams differentiating themselves at the top of offenses this year. If you are unpredictable, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for defenses to prepare and keep you limited in the regular season this year, and especially in the playoffs. And so I think, it's a slow start to the season has never scared anyone away from backing the Chiefs in the futures market. I don't think their prices are going to drift, even if it is kind of a chaotic, underwhelming start to the season for this group. But the way that their schedule is sequenced and, in general, the quality that we expect from Mahomes and, Travis Kelce still in his prime, I think is going to allow for this wide receiver group to develop. They can lean more into the run game because pretty clearly they found a guy in Pacheco that fits their scheme hand in glove. There's nothing that Mahomes, I don't think, can do, nothing that he can't do in terms of elevating the personnel around him. And then, just beyond that, the interior offensive line I have ranked number 1 in the NFL. Tackle group I have a little bit of a question mark because there's some new pieces. Continuity back to that kind of concept is important for an offensive line. And you have some, you have some new faces in that room, some that, may be a downgrade. We'll see. But ultimately, Mahomes facing pressure from the exterior is more of that's like a nightmare for the defense. If he's forced to roll out of the pocket and his choices are scramble for 10 yards or hit the home run ball, then, you're asking for a little bit of trouble there. So I think Matt Nagy is going to step in and do a perfectly, appropriate job with this group. I would look for more explosiveness, and that may offer some opportunities to get involved with, totals, because, particularly in live game scenarios, right? If they have more explosiveness this year, then, the idea that they're going to come back from a deficit or, really be able to put up some pretty impressive offensive scoring numbers, I think is real.
Yep. I think it would have been more fun if Kadarius Toney was healthy to start the season, because I think he could have added an element that they haven't had, I guess, since Tyreek Hill. Obviously, they're not the same level of player or even close, but Toney does add an explosive element, as we saw in the Super Bowl. I'm just out on trusting Kadarius Toney's health, I think, ever. I think Sky Moore is going to be the guy in that spot. And obviously, Travis Kelce will continue to do what he does. I think just the only way to bet this team is just to bet on Mahomes MVP. We've talked about it before. I'll give the quick speech again. Here's what Mahomes has done in his 5 years in the league. 2018, wins MVP going away. 2019, he gets hurt, still finishes 4th in Offensive Player of the Year. He was on pace that year for almost 5,000 yards again. I don't think he would have won MVP, but he was in the mix. 2020, he goes personally 14-1. I think he's the favorite with like 2 weeks to go. And then Aaron Rodgers has like 4 touchdowns against Tennessee in prime time from memory. So he's right there again. 2021 was his bad year, where he didn't deserve to really be in the mix. And that was the year I think he really adjusted as a player, as teams took away the deep ball to Tyreek, and he had to become more of a short to intermediate surgeon. And that was the transition year, by the way, which somehow in a transition year, they still ended up hosting the AFC title game and were extremely short to win that at halftime. And then last year, he wins MVP again with ease. Like, I think this guy is just the most talented football player there's ever been. I think he's going to go down as the greatest player of all time. And there's still plus 700 out there in the market. And I just don't think the peak Patrick Mahomes can ever be considered a 12.5% chance to win MVP in the heart of his prime. So we talked about it a fair bit, but I just think that's wrong. I just think it's wrong. I just think he should be like plus 250, plus 300, plus 350, whatever. He can't be plus 700 to win MVP every year of his prime until further notice. What else in terms of the Chiefs, in terms of any other markets that are of interest, be it Kelsey Offensive Player of the Year, Rashee Rice, O'Roy, anything else that tickles your fancy with the Chiefs?
I think there's going to be a pretty shared distribution of target share among the wide receiver group, which I think dampens any excitement about those guys. I agree with you. Tony's not going to be a factor. I think you're going to see plenty of Sky Moore, plenty of Rashee Rice, plenty of maybe even Justin Ross. He's had some pretty good chemistry from some of the clips and discussion that I've seen and heard with Mahomes. So a young group, they could be inconsistent. Any week where, if there's a couple weeks in a row where the wide receivers are letting them down and people start to cool on the Chiefs overall, then that may be a decent buy low on a given week. But I don't think any of these guys warrant award consideration outside of Mahomes.
Yep. And I don't think anyone should ever waste their time with Andy Reid, Coach of the Year. He has to go 17-0, I think, to win Coach of the Year, or it has to be an absolutely barren field and maybe 16-1 could do it. But I don't think Andy Reid is going to win Coach of the Year while he's got Patrick Mahomes on his team. All right. Before we get into the Washington Commanders, there's no better place to be in Boston on a Sunday morning than legendary Fenway Park. See if the Red Sox can close the gap for the final wild card spot when they host the Detroit Tigers at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on MLB Leadoff. Stream the action live exclusively on Peacock. All right, Eric Bieniemy has departed the Chiefs and gone to Washington. Slight downgrading quarterback, Sam Howell from Patrick Mahomes. The Commanders, who, again, for just the 50th year in a row, feel like they are just the epitome of a 7-win team. They are plus 290 to make the playoffs. They're 10-1 to win the NFC East. It looks like it's probably going to be Sam Howell. Is there any reason to be particularly bullish or bearish relative to market on Washington?
Offense, I think there are plenty of reasons to be bearish. Bearish is sort of the swirling wind out of camp. Bearish is also the kind of confluence of what is a lackluster offensive line, the 32nd best quarterback in the NFL, and a defensive schedule in the first 10 weeks that features Denver, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Philly, again, New England, Seattle. These are all above average defenses. The small reprieve you have is Arizona to start your season and then Chicago week 5. Other than that, you're playing an above average defense every single week until week 15 when you get to face the Rams. That is not a recipe for kind of integrating a young quarterback like Sam Howell into a new system and finding success behind an offensive line that has a specific weakness in the interior. So I think realistically, this is going to go pretty sideways after presumably a week 1 win, maybe even a week 1 cover against the Arizona Cardinals. So the defense is really what's going to have to get it done for the Washington Commanders if they're going to reach 500, in my opinion. I rank their offensive personnel on paper overall 31st. skill position group is maybe the only bright side here because they at least have a couple of guys that you can build around in particularly Terry McLaurin, who I think a lot of people would agree is somewhere in the 15 to 20 range in terms of just raw talent at the wide receiver position and is a fine guy to be a true wide receiver one. Jahan Dotson, we don't really know what he can be. Curtis Samuel is a perpetual injury waiting to happen. And then the tight end room is extremely weak for the Washington Commanders. So it's going to come down to Terry McLaurin making things happen in spectacular fashion realistically. And when he's going up against a team that has decent CB1, I think that spells trouble. And when they're going up against a team that has a decent pass rush, particularly a team that has a decent left edge, a strong side edge player and or a decent interior pressure machine, like along the lines of a lot of the guys they're going to have to face this year, maybe even the Rams and Aaron Donald. I think the interior of Chris Paul, Nick Gates, Sam Cosmi, that to me spells trouble. You have lack of continuity across this group, and there's really no standout players. Even the depth is questionable there. So Sam Howell under pressure, I think unravels the ceiling entirely for this group. And Eric Bieniemy, I don't 100% really know what to expect. Like you kind of said it tongue in cheek. This is as big a downgrade as you can have in terms of starting quarterback expectation, going from Pat Mahomes to Sam Howell as your QB1. And I don't even really know what you can borrow from your experience and your time working with Andy Reid to apply to this group, which is a little bit of a head scratcher as to why Bieniemy selected this job, why Washington wanted him here. I don't 100% really know what the vision is, which is always a troubling thing if we are here on the eve of the start of the season. So Washington to me is kind of, they are very much in contention for fewest points scored. I know we talked about that with the Jets the other day, and I think you're getting better prices with the Jets than you're getting with Washington, but Washington is absolutely in the conversation for fewest points scored considering this defensive schedule. And I think, realistically, if they intend to tear this thing down, they should listen to offers for Terry McLaurin. They should listen to offers for, some of the players on the defensive side of the ball that they may not ultimately want to pay and keep in-house. So it's going to be a transitioning year here as they go to this new ownership group and presumably figure out what they want to do in the future at the quarterback position. But I would give Sam Howell something about like a 5% chance to perform at a league average level, which might not even be enough for him to keep his job and might not be enough for the Washington Commanders to get to 500.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting at least from a game-to-game perspective if they do go to Brissett at some point, because I think Brissett is actually good in a way that's completely irrelevant for the future of this franchise. But game to game, there might be some lazy openers if Brissett is in and it's not accounted for properly. I think with Brissett, last year he was better than Aaron Rodgers by EPA per play and statistics like completion percentage over expected. He was a top 12 type quarterback in the league. So, he was really good. And you don't know how much of that is, having a really good offensive line in Cleveland, and now he wouldn't have one in Washington. But I agree. There's just not that much to sink your teeth into on this team. The only bet around this team that is interesting to me, and I haven't placed this, but it's one that just leapt off the page a little bit. Chase Young is 150 to 1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. And I don't think he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He hasn't shown anything yet in his NFL career to suggest that he's got that in him this year. But we're not that far removed from him being drafted as a generational defensive prospect. He's another year further removed from a serious injury. And there is a chance that he just has the talent to enter that tier of, Garrett, Watt, Parsons, Bosa. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility as it is with other guys who are in that range for DPOY. So that's just something just to keep an eye on. If Chase Young has, 3 sacks in week 1 and 2 in week 2, then all of a sudden I think he's probably a guy to take seriously. I don't know. It just seems weird that Chase Young, just still the name value attached, and just seeing him on the board for DPOI at 150 to 1 just seemed a little bit big. Yeah. Anything else with the Commanders?
What I'm watching for is week 5, Thursday Night Football. The Commanders take on the Chicago Bears. This is the bellwether game for me for your offense.
Sure.
They don't have enough. They can't really generate interior pressure. They don't have any horses. I know they just signed Yannick Ngakoue. It doesn't really move the needle for me in terms of elevating their pass rush to a place where they are going to be meaningfully winning 1v1 against this offensive line as poor as it is. So if you can't get something going offensively in that game against the Bears, then I am ready to full on sell. Like, I won't penalize you if you can't score more than 17 against Denver. I'm not going to give you a hard time if you can't get into the high teens against Buffalo or Philly. Like, but at Chicago, if you don't get into the 20s there, then I think it's time to see Jacoby Brissett. You have a mini bye to get him ready for week 6 at Atlanta. But I got to tell you, man, I think Jacoby Brissett benefited pretty substantially from having one of the best interior lines with the Browns last year. He just was never really under direct pressure coming up the middle. And I think people are still underrating this Atlanta defense. Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata side by side on that interior could be game wreckers. So right now the look ahead is Washington at Atlanta +1. And I think people are going to talk themselves into some Washington bets there if it's Jacoby Brissett week 6. But that would be the time that I think people, that was what I would do. Give Sam Howell 5 weeks, give him a chance to go up against two quite very beatable defenses in Arizona and Chicago, and if he doesn't get it done, then you pull the switcheroo when you have the mini bye.
Yep. With Brissett, I think Brissett is probably like the 21st best quarterback in the NFL, who just kind of got a little bit lucky on his way to being like the 11th best quarterback in the league for 12-13 games last year in a favorable context. So yeah, it would make them, I think, more competent, but there's just no point. There's just no point to rolling out Jacoby Brissett on a team that really should be probably blowing it up and going for a top 2-3 draft pick. Before we sign off, just want to keep our streak alive of mentioning AL Cy Young, because I feel like we're controlling this market now with just our thoughts. We control if Framber Valdez gives up 6 earned runs. Shohei Ohtani is coming. He is coming. He was lights out last night. We're recording this on Thursday, and his odds right now are twice Luis Castillo's. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely insane. Shohei Ohtani is more likely to win AL Cy Young than Luis Castillo. So just wanted to mention Cy Young again. Still Garrett Cole, rightful favorite, but Shohei and Kevin Gausman are lingering, and I don't think Gosman's a bet at these like plus 300 now. It's too short. But Shohei's 30-1. And he should not be. I think he should be half that price. Anyway, AL Cy Young. We'll check in again on that market tomorrow as we do our daily check-in. Okay, don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please don't forget to rate and subscribe if you're listening to us in podcast form. And also a reminder, you can find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on music. Amazon.com/NBC Sports. I'm Jay Croucher and Dinsick. We'll be back tomorrow.